tosta vaan päälle.
So, hello and welcome to the seminar, Education and Training Pathways of Youth Workers. I am Sari Höylä from Humak University of Applied Sciences, but right away I will give the floor to our guest speakers. So, Ministry of European Affairs, Culture and Sport of Finland, Sampo Terho, and Director General of Democracy of the Council of Europe, Snezana Samardzic-Markovic. Please, floor is yours.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Director General, and distinguished representatives of the Council of Europe, you have to be very sharp with this. So, welcome to this main event in the field of youth, held during Finland's chairmanship of the Council of Europe. Finland is chairing the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe from November 2018 to May 2019, for the first time in more than 20 years. During our term of chairmanship, the Council of Europe will also celebrate its 70th anniversary, which gives us a great opportunity to increase the Council of Europe's visibility and make its activities known to a wider audience. For Finland, the Council of Europe offers a major forum of international cooperation in youth field, culture and sports. During our chairmanship, our key priority is to keep strengthening the crucial work of the Council of Europe in advancing human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Other key priorities include equality and women's rights, openness, inclusion, young people, and the prevention of radicalization. The Council of Europe has played and continues to play a key role in the development of Finnish youth work and youth policies. In 1997, Finland was honored to become the first country where the Council of Europe conducted an international review of national youth policies. 20 other countries have since followed Finland's example. That external critical evaluation, which nevertheless respected our national characteristics, laid the foundation for Finland's reforms over the next decade. Encouraged by our good experience, we again asked the Council of Europe for an opinion when we prepared our current Youth Act. The Council of Europe has developed standards and instruments that support both local and national work. A concrete example of this is the Council of Europe Quality Label for Youth Centres, which has been awarded to 2 of our national youth centres. It was not by chance that the youth workers' training and skills were chosen as the topic of this chairmanship seminar. The first recommendation of the Committee of Ministers on Youth Work, which the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers adopted in May 2017 was an important step forward in how European youth work is being developed and how it is respected. Finland's youth sector played an important role in supporting and backing up its preparation. I'm pleased that during our chairmanship we can contribute to implementation of the recommendation. In comparison with many other European countries, youth work enjoys relatively strong position in Finland. It is governed by national law and has very high standards of training and development. The Finnish youth work has many strengths, such as wide scope, high quality, professional approach, and innovativeness. For these reasons, the youth sector is also recognized as an active partner in cross-sector collaboration. An open society and an active civil society are essential in building democracy. Youth participation has long been a priority area, both for the Council of Europe and Finland. Nationally, we have used legislation to safeguard young people's right to participate in the decision-making concerning them. When high-quality youth work is made available to support young people, the civil society grows stronger and active citizenship is promoted. The value base of youth work is identical to the moral principles of human rights education. For example, youth work can prevent young people from becoming radicalized by violent extremist groups. Youth work, education and training are crucial for these prevention efforts. The training and education background and requirements of youth workers, both volunteers and employees, vary considerably across Europe. If we seek to improve the standards of youth work, we must invest in developing the youth workers' education and training in Europe. Peer learning and practical training and coaching can accelerate the exchange of good and innovations while raising the youth workers' profile. This year, Finland has an exceptionally good opportunity to influence the development of European youth work and youth policies. Soon after the chairmanship of the Council of Europe ends, we will take over the presidency of the Council of Europe, European Union, until the end of 2019. Youth workers' education and training are high on the agenda of both our chairmanship and presidency. I wish to extend my sincerest thanks to the Council of Europe for their excellent cooperation and the opportunity to hold this seminar as part of our chairmanship program. I wish you all an inspiring and productive seminar. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Minister Terho, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, and for many, I can say, dear friends. For me, it's a great pleasure to address you here today for actually several reasons, but I can mention, let's say, two of them. First, because this seminar, training paths on youth workers, is a milestone event in the implementation of the Committee of Ministers' recommendation on youth work. And here, excuse me for a little bit of protocol, but I really have to publicly and from the bottom of my heart thank our Finnish hosts for their unwavering support, as the Minister also mentioned, in pushing the youth work agenda forward. So that was the first reason. It's a pleasure really to be here because of this important milestone event. There is another reason. As
announced here because there is no need for further explanation. Everyone here knows that youth work is neither youth employment nor child labor or some dubious way to get additional pension rights for young people active in civil society. And I think it's a great common start to our seminar. Now, we have a slogan chosen for the 70th anniversary of Council of Europe. This is our rights, our freedom, our Europe. We celebrate the anniversary this year under the slogan. For the past 7 decades, and we work for somebody that we hear, I think it's Enno. Hi, Enno. We speak about his future too. So for the past 7 decades, the Council of Europe has been promoting and safeguarding human rights, building genuine democracy, and strengthening the rule of law on our continent. Less known, but surely of great interest to everyone here, 2019, 50th anniversary of the creation of our European Youth Center in Strasbourg, which is an emblematic place for many of you and an important reference for youth work and youth policy in Europe. For half a century, the Council of Europe has been involving young people in the shaping of democracy and the promotion of human rights values. What do we do in the Center and in Council of Europe? We invite young people to take part in our decision-making process thanks to our pioneering co-management system. Young people and those working with them get involved in building together more just, more democratic and safer societies all over Europe, with the support of the European centers in Strasbourg and in Budapest, and with the support of the European Youth Foundation. We promote human rights-based, participative and opportunity-focused youth policies that see young people as a resource, not as a problem. Policies that empower young people and engage them in the development of democratic, inclusive and peaceful societies domestically and in Europe. Thus helping young people to become agents of positive change, bringing real changes to their present and their future, as well as to the future of the generations to come. In my former role as a minister responsible for youth in my home country, I often struggled to find modern, cutting-edge, participative and state-of-the-art standards for youth policy. I would look around, I would look at UN, I would look at many organizations, but it was always the Council of Europe that came to rescue, and I often found inspiration in the Council of Europe work. Yet, when it comes to comprehensive standards on youth work, there was little available then. And when I was about to pass the law on youth, I met quite a lot of suspicion from the Ministry of Labour and from other ministries, because there was no really clear standard on what youth work means. And for me, it was important to do that in order to put youth work on the agenda and give them importance for future and secure funds. So the term youth describes the increasingly long period of growing up from being the dependent child to becoming an autonomous adult. This time span is most likely one of the biggest adventures and challenges in a person's lifetime. It is also, I think, most decisive for their future. During youth, the influence and support of family, friends, and schools is important. But we know that most young people need additional opportunities, resources, and tools to develop their full potential as individuals and more as members of societies and as young citizens. Youth work is not the only source of support, but it is surely one of the most important ones, providing complementary opportunities as well as enabling and formative experience to young people. This is why promoting and supporting youth work has been and is and will continue to be a priority for my Directorate General and its Youth Department. This objective with the European Commission, which is why youth work is also a priority for our long-standing youth partnership with that institution. Minister Terho, we are particularly grateful for the Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture for taking an active and constructive role in driving forward the youth work agenda in Europe during Finland's chairmanship and as you announced during the upcoming EU presidency. The community of youth work and youth policy practice in Europe looks at Finland's youth sector with admiration and probably also with a little bit of envy. Youth work and youth policy hold a recognized place in Finnish public policy. Participants here will have the opportunity to study the exemplary training and education offers for both volunteers and paid youth workers. Yet, the Finnish youth sector is also respected for its modesty and the sheer absence of boosting, you know, and also not only that, but of complacency. You never stop asking what more can we do to improve. And I think what is also very nice about Finnish approach is that you always not only look at yourself as a leader, but you try to find what can you learn from others. This is highly appreciated. So this seminar, as part of the program of the Finnish chairmanship of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, is in a way also very importantly strategically placed between other two major events. The first one was the second European Youth Work Convention, hosted by the Belgian chairmanship in 2015. And there will be in future the third Youth Work Convention, which will be hosted by German chairmanship in 2020. In 2017, we in the Council of Europe were able to deliver on a promise I made at the closing session of the second European Work Convention in Brussels. Some of you might remember that I publicly committed on behalf of Council of Europe that we will deliver, and I'm very happy we did. We developed a recommendation on youth work, which was adopted unanimously by 47 member states. And I would say not just like that, it's 47 governments who agreed on something. I think it's a miracle in itself, wouldn't you say? And I and my colleagues, I guess together with you, are very proud of this recommendation because we are convinced, in a way, in partnership with the EU, but Council of Europe was the one who was able to do it. It is the first, and so far the only, international policy document offering reference points, benchmarks, policy and quality standards for youth work. The recommendation plays an essential role in underlining the complementarity of the youth work carried out by volunteers on the one hand and by paid youth workers on the other. The studies carried out during the drafting process showed us that the gap between definitions, provisions, and recognition of youth work in different is actually much wider than we assumed. One of the major challenges we have identified is the existing huge discrepancy between and within training and education provisions for both volunteers and paid youth workers. And this is why our high-level task force on youth work is paying particular attention to measures to address this situation. The youth work recommendation has created very important political momentum. It has moved youth work higher up on the political agenda, and that was the intention of it, among other things. And there is a reason to be optimistic. Yet, like the Finns, we should be happy and proud, but not be complacent. The recommendation should help the youth work sector to unite and to develop. Within the youth sector, youth work sector, but even more importantly, in relation to other policy fields. One of your important tasks will be to make youth work better known and understood, not only here, but outside of the youth sector. This work in building inclusive and peaceful societies, as the Minister also underlined, and in upholding democracy and human rights are not actually well understood outside of this room and outside of youth sector. The implementation of the youth work recommendation is a mid and long-term task. As the Council of Europe, we commit to supporting our member states to embed youth work provisions in national policy. We will collect and disseminate examples of good practice and work towards a common system based on competencies, both for paid and volunteer youth workers. And of course, we will also listen to the needs of young people and those working with and for young people so that we may develop relevant measures and standards. 70 years ago, the Council of Europe was set up in the wake of the horrific events of the Second World War. Never again should Europe's citizens' human rights be trampled underfoot. Never again should democracy be cast aside to give way to despotic political power. And yet today, in spite of all our efforts, we see that democracy that we thought was assured is wilting. Europe is facing a crisis of democratic values. We are witnessing a rise of populism and illiberal democracy. That civic engagement that populist democracy requires has not been nurtured enough. And I think it's also because very many, for generations before, have taken democracy for granted. And they took probably youth work for granted. And they took also all the efforts to engage youth and explain them what human rights, democracy, rule of law means. They took it for granted. And of course, I think I can say something we all probably share, that democracy is pretty much under pressure, if not under threat. So, sustainable and sustained youth work provisions are crucial if we want to give young people the best start in adult life. Youth work is essential if we want to keep that sense of civic engagement alive in the young peoples of today and tomorrow. Young people can benefit greatly from Europe, but Europe needs its young people more than ever, so as to make sure of that democratic values live on. Europe needs young people who confidentially and convincingly say loud and clear, our rights, our freedom, our Europe. So, with these words, I wish you fruitful discussions, and of course, as usual, I look forward reading.
Okay, thank you. Due to urgent timetable, sorry, our minister needs to go, but we will continue. So that mentioned recommendations on youth work. I will invite the head of Youth Department of the Council of Europe, Antje Rotemund, to guide us and to listen a little bit more about these recommendations. And that is also, that recommendation document, it's also the basis of this seminar. So please, Antje.
Thank you very much, Sari, and hello, everybody. Good to see you here at this seminar. And I have 15 minutes to lead you quickly through this recommendation that you surely have read, all of you, before coming here. That is really nice. I see so many nodding heads. It looks like that. In case you don't have it yet, it's outside on the publications table. And it is also available in 13 different languages already, which you find on the website of the seminar and also on the website of the Council of Europe Youth Sector, our youth portal. So, dear colleagues and dear friends, I would like to give you a short introduction of the only and first ever Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe recommendation on youth work. Is this the thing I have to use? Sorry. Yeah, okay. And where do I have to look with it? In which direction? I look to the technician infrared. And I just have to point at you or point at this computer? Okay. Okay, thank you. Now I can walk around the flowers, don't worry. Yeah. I just thought it looks so celebrity-like between these flower pots. Just to recall, Council of Europe, 47 member states on the map. It looks like that. So in the youth sector, we also work with 3 other countries, signatory parties of the Cultural Convention. So to the 47 you see here, the Holy See, Kazakhstan and Belarus. What is the Committee of Ministers? It's basically the Council of Europe's highest statutory decision-making body, and the people that are sitting there when it's complete are the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the 47 member states. Other than in the European Union, when you talk about the European Council, it's the heads of government that sit there, just to show you the difference. So what is a Committee of Ministers recommendation? I pointed at you, but it disappeared. The next slide doesn't come, funny enough. So. Okay, try again. Okay. So what is a Committee of Ministers recommendation? First of all, it's important. It's not binding, which is actually a very good thing, because this is, gives the possibility to introduce it and implement it at their own pace and according to their state of development. It is accompanied, if you look at that, by an explanatory memorandum to make it easier to understand and explain the context. And the General Director said we also had to explain what youth work is for those who don't know. And there is something which is very specific for Committee of Ministers recommendation in the youth sector, and that is that we also commit ourselves to look after the implementation. So after 5 years after the adoption, we are committing ourselves to carry out a review of what we have done with it. And this is why this seminar here is because it's an important part of the implementation roadmap. So why did we have, is there a need to have such a recommendation? I think most of you would find it easy to say we have to give youth work another boost, but we actually found out that the access to youth work is quite variable and very diverse all over Europe. The transition of young people, as you know, all of you who are active in youth work and youth policy, are more challenging in the past. Their perspectives are more precarious. But also, there is a lack of understanding of what youth work is and a lack of definition and a lack of quality standards. So we hope that this recommendation will help to actually get people, get young people, a package which helps them to develop their full potential and to become autonomous and active citizens. And the rest you can read yourself. What does such a recommendation include? So it looks, oh, we are already online. Wow, look with photo, great. Soon you will see me there. I mean, so the content of the recommendation is, it has different chapters, and that is a sort of standard of this kind of document. But what is important for us, it refers to, in the preamble, to what we have done before in that field, why it's important for the Council of Europe, why it's important for its member states. It shows what is covered by this recommendation in the scope. It defines what it is about, and we find in this recommendation a definition, or we sometimes say a description of youth work, so to set the frame in which it takes place. And we have principles which are guiding this recommendation, which I have later on another slide, sorry, and the recommendations. So the measures and the recommendations are important for the community of practice because, in fact, this is the area we have to work on in our work. Just to say very quickly, what is also special about this particular recommendation was the drafting process, because it was a very collaborative and cooperative project to create also ownership in what we call the community of practice. We brought together collective knowledge from all over Europe, and you see that there was a very wide range of sort of experience represented in the drafting group from the governmental side, from the professional youth work sector, and also from the non-governmental voluntary youth work side and other institutions. We worked on that recommendation for 2 years. And it was adopted by our Joint Council on Youth, which is a co-managed body of governments and youth organizations in the Council of Europe, a unique decision-making body in an international organization where young people sit around the table in the decision-making. And it was adopted, as it was mentioned before, unanimously by the Committee of Ministers in 2017. So, of course, there is a lot of work going around such a recommendation, and you will, after my little presentation, my colleagues from the partnership between the European Commission and the Council of Europe in the field of youth will present you the results of a study that we have carried out, where we tried to map what is actually there. I mean, what is the situation of youth work in Europe today? And there were sort of questions asked like these ones. Is there actually a legislative framework for youth policy? Is there a definition for youth work? Do you have training paths for youth workers, whether they are paid or volunteers? And that's also a very special feature of our recommendation, that we cover both fields. We cover the field of people that carry out youth work as a profession or a vocation, are paid for it, and those who are active in youth organizations and in other civil society sectors as volunteers and as youth workers. So I'm not going to go into that because the result of this study will be presented by my colleagues. But recommendations that have resulted out of this work have also a lot to do with the result of this study. Namely, we found out that the gap that we assumed is there in terms of what is there in terms of provision is actually much bigger than we initially thought. So this recommendation also tries to fill a gap of understanding of practice and of provisions for youth work in Europe. You can read the different recommendations, and I also would like to share with you the principles under which we have developed these recommendations, because this is very important to understand that we are covering youth work from a Council of Europe perspective. That means a human rights approach, a human rights perspective, and also, of course, participation is extremely important as a precondition for active citizenship in democracy. And as the Director General said, of course, the young persons are in the center of this recommendation. It's a youth-centered recommendation where young people are considered a resource. Now, the task force on youth work was already mentioned. One of the measures proposed was that there should be a group of people that should work on pushing this recommendation forward and help to implement it in member states. And the members of the task force are, most of them, all here, because the task force met on Monday, Tuesday, and this morning in the wake of this seminar to develop the next step of the action that they are suggesting to member states, but also to the Council of Europe and to my department and to our partners. And this task force members will also be available for you during the seminar to speak and can inform you more about what is happening next, what is on the roadmap of the implementation, and how did we come to this recommendation, what are we going to do with it. Now, one specific measure I would like to take out, because this is actually the measure that we are pursuing with this seminar. And that is the measure on the coherent and flexible competency-based framework for the education and training of paid and volunteer youth workers. And we know that the study showed that the gap there is enormous, and I don't say more because my colleagues will present this in a second. Now, coming to the end here, there are a couple of steps or the next most important steps in implementing the recommendation roadmap. The task force just finished its meeting today at 11:30, the third meeting, and now we are starting the seminar. And we are already discussing the next big event, which will be the third European Youth Work Convention in Germany, in Bonn, in December 2020. And the review process, which I have been mentioning as a very special element of how youth works with such implementation, because with such recommendations, because we want to make sure that something happens with it. We don't want to just have a paper which is filed on the shelves. So we are, in a way, a bit under pressure, because we would like to have some positive review after this 5 years. So we will need you to help us to implement this roadmap, and I invite you not only in this seminar, but also when you go back to your normal youth work practice and youth policy practice, to leave a couple of your footprints on this road that we are trying to go there together. So thank you very much. I would like to finish saying this was second European Youth Work Convention in Brussels, which was under the subject finding common ground for youth work in Europe in 2015. And this is how youth workers see themselves. Have to solve all the problems of society and more, of course. And I really like this drawing because it's good, because it says there is also a self-confidence in this group of people. Yet, one aim that we have, it would be nice if others also see us like that. So please help us to make this better known. I wish you a very good summer. Let's be superheroes here as well and make some big footprints on the roadmap of the implementation of this recommendation. Thank you.
So thank you, Antje. And like Antje told us already, there are committed couple studies about youth and education, education and training of youth workers in Europe. And one of them is made by Council of Europe, European Union Youth Partnership, and the other one is made by Finnish Youth Research Society. So, and Marta Medlinska and Tanja Basarab from Youth Partnership will be here and tell us more.
Good afternoon, everybody. I can put this safely on the side and not push any button. That's a relief. My name is Marta Mendlinska, and I'm from the partnership between the European Commission and the Council of Europe in the field of youth. I was told I shouldn't be taken for granted that people know what it is. So I'm sorry if this is a repetition for many of you, but just in very brief words, we work on implementing whatever the partner institutions, the European Commission and the Council of Europe, consider relevant for their work and want to work on jointly. And we have been doing it for 20 years, and for more than half of this time, youth work was one of the focuses that we had, one of the priorities, especially as of 2014. And we were looking, thank you, Snezhana. Snezhana is meeting the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and is excusing herself. Thank you, Snezhana. So we have been looking at the history of youth work. We have been looking at the quality of youth work, at principles and concepts that guide it, and on the recognition of youth work. All the topics that you could see in the documents already ahead of this seminar. And of course, we were very happy to share all this knowledge on our website. We have been there for preparing and implementing the first European Youth Work Convention, the second one, and we are very, very happy to be here and to be useful also to this great event of the Finnish Chairmanship. Thank you for this invitation. Since 2017, we have been collecting knowledge on youth work, as Antje already mentioned, and about different aspects of youth work, from the legal basis through the structures that exist to support it, understanding of youth work, provisions related to funding, and so on. But in particular, we were focusing on, indeed, how one can become a youth worker. So educational pathways, as one may nicely say it, but we know that this is a very, very diverse and very scattered, picture across Europe. And thanks to the help of our correspondents of the European Knowledge Center for Youth Policy, we collected a lot of data, and still there were huge gaps. And we were reaching out to other people who could help us collect more information. So thank you, perhaps some of you were among those. And indeed, as mentioned by Antje earlier, the possibility to the potential of growth is really there. And I think that that's a positive way of looking at it, and there is a lot that we can learn from each other. I will not go into further details of it because I will pass it on to Tanya, who was in charge of this very complex project, to share the findings with you. Just one caution note, even if there are gaps, there might be data that is not fully there. It was very difficult to collect it. Please help us to continue trying to understand where we are with youth work. And I think it will be still a useful contribution indeed to thinking further how we can strengthen the sector, youth work, and support the youth workers. Thank you very much. This is forward, this is back.
Okay, so I know that there are many people here who contributed to this study, who have already started to discuss the findings of this study and who have been showing interest to really take it one step further and see how let's say the situation in their particular case can be improved based on examples that we have also been able to include here. So before we go further, I would like to share with you that this drawing we have kept, it's made by a youth worker, Mattia Losego. Many of you might know him. And we think that it really does show the space, the possibilities are unlimited. And the youth workers are also somehow, these youth workers seem confident, but they're also happy to get some more support and guidance. So you will see the drawing on some other papers, but do not assume that it's the same document. Just read the title and then you will see what it's talking about. It's already been mentioned that since the partnership sits between the two institutions at European level, the idea of this study, at least the aim that was defined, was to support the implementation of the recommendation, to really see what kind of formal and non-formal education paths, but we also attempted to look at what are the career pathways that youth workers go for or might be getting in the countries. This was a very small part of the study, but still I think that it's important to mention it. Okay, so what was the process? It was partly explained. We work with a network of country correspondents who are usually appointed by the member states. And sometimes these correspondents sit within the public service for youth, so within the ministries or departments, and others are researchers, and others are, let's say, consultants who are contracted externally by the governments. And in addition to this process of data gathering, we have submitted this the findings of this study through quite thorough check by the government representatives in the CDEJ, and lots of people have given us feedback. And I would like to thank here also the editor of this report. He is here, James O'Donovan. I think by now he has included so many updates and so many corrections in this study just to make sure that we have as up-to-date information as possible. What we looked for, apart from what Antje mentioned, we started with the general policy and legislation framework. We looked also at regulation of youth work as a profession, so questions around occupational standards, youth worker profile, is it a recognized profession? Is it not? We looked at non-formal education and training for youth workers. So really, we approached the advisory on youth. We approached the youth forum to disseminate this questionnaire as widely as possible to the youth sector. We also approached the network of public youth services at municipal level. So we try to cast as wide a net as possible. We also ask questions about quality and competencies. If there are national competence frameworks, what actually do they say, what youth workers should know or should have? We asked if there are associations or similar structures that represent or that train or that have a particular role in the country for improving the situation of youth workers and youth work in general. And as I said, we had a few questions about employment and career paths in the different countries. So, because the correspondents are appointed by the ministries, the results that you read in this report is basically the perspective of the member states of the Council of Europe, because obviously it was not an independent submission. So I would say that you should read the report as a self-reported presentation of how the state sees their youth work picture. We have been able to get information from 41 countries. We didn't reach, or we reached maybe too late. Denmark, Hungary, Spain and Switzerland are missing from this picture. We hope, of course, to complete that picture. This is a little bit the process of how it was finalized and shaped. What is the structure? So first of all, I would like to tell you that if you haven't opened yet the folders, we have printed the main part of the report, the narrative part. And this is the structure which is similar to the questionnaire that was circulated. But because we got, I think one of the researchers in the team said that we got over 2,000 data entries, so over a lot of information was gathered. We decided to also structure that information in additional, as additional resource. So you would see there are 15 tables in addition to the narrative report, and they present information, for example, on countries that have vocational and further education, or quality and competencies, what the different countries said. So this we think is a great resource for any country who wants to review, update, or develop their system. There is a link here. I think that we have added the link to that page with all this information and the main studies on the seminar page. So I won't switch now, but you will find it there. Okay, so let's see what are the main findings. All the countries more or less said that they have some form, well, they all have a structure that is in charge of youth policy. Now, what is that structure? You have to also keep in mind that the data gathering happened between a certain period of time. So things change in the youth sector very often. Governments change very often these days, it seems. So the youth portfolio can move quickly from one to another ministry. But at least there was, at least at the time of data collection, someone in charge. 34 countries had some sort of policy framework. It was more general policy frameworks that some countries explain, and others had very specific on youth work. Not that many had specific on youth work. But 21 countries were in process of developing. So this shows actually that it's a very dynamic sector. There are many countries that are in process of developing something as we speak. Formal and non-formal education and training. Here you have the countries that are highlighted in red offer formal education, degree-level courses. The countries in blue also offer only up to vocational level education, and the countries in yellow rely on training and educating youth workers only through non-formal pathways. In almost all the countries, also there is a voluntary sector that also participates in education of youth workers. But specifically, the countries that are in yellow, they don't have at national level or in terms of at the country level a coherent approach to formal workers. And as the researchers found, there seems to be a division of where there is more interest to train youth workers through formal education and where there is less. In terms of quality and competence, 18 countries have some form of quality assurance systems. Again, if you look at the coloring, the red color is about having some sort of tools on quality assurance and competency-based tools. And then the blue ones only have quality assurance tools. This does not mean that the country does not do good quality assurance, but it's just it chose to go only that way of measuring the quality of youth worker education. And then a few countries here in yellow have defined competencies, and a few countries mentioned that they are in process of developing the profile and the competency base and so on. What kind of approaches? I would say that this was a difficult question to interpret by many people who submitted the information. Some interpreted it, let's say, narrowly, and others quite widely. And that's why I would say that the picture could probably change slightly in your country or in a specific country, depending on the angle. But for example, we mentioned a few, you will read it in the report. There is certification of courses for youth workers, there is evaluation of youth workers, there are national standards. Sometimes the quality is embedded in the funding requirements. So yeah, it's very diverse. The researchers took the description that was given to them by 10 countries of the competency framework. So if you look at this puzzle, starting from the middle, you would see that let's say the two puzzle pieces that are in pink, at least from my perspective, they are most frequently mentioned. And so this is a study only based on the information from 10 countries. This is important to keep in mind. And then around the whole orange part, more times these competencies were mentioned as requirements. And then further around, I would say it's more specialized competencies or more management-related, project management-related competencies. They were mentioned less frequently. When it comes to the associations and networking of youth workers, so this is the picture that we get. 15 countries have associations of youth workers, and this is generally they do training, they promote professional competence, the profile, the status, the parity of status of the profession of youth worker compared to social work or education. And other sort of neighboring professions. And in 11 countries, other organizations do that. So it could be trade unions, it could be youth work development support centers. It's a little bit different. And on that, we went even here, and there is a specific paper that highlights some case studies about the type of structures, associations and networks that promote, that support youth worker education. In terms of employment, career paths and professionalization, so 13 countries actually provided numbers, so that was interesting to see. On the youth workers that are employed by the state, because I remind you the data was submitted by people who represented the picture from the side of the state. 11 countries also, 11 countries provided the numbers, 13 a bit more than the numbers. 22 countries have occupational standards. This is an interesting point to look at because although there is occupational standard development, it does not automatically mean that there is achieved parity of status or even professional status status of youth workers. But there are also countries where occupational standard development was the core of developing the whole recognition of youth worker as a profession. And in 10 countries mentioned that they monitor, actually, they have some sort of registers or some sort of system of monitoring the people who are paid or work for the state, I suppose. And these are the places that were mentioned where youth workers usually work. I've mentioned a bit some of the challenges of collecting the data. Certainly not, what was clear was that there is not enough data to understand the picture, the full picture of youth workers and their education. So many people actually struggled to find information, we asked. And some had to choose on what level they can respond, because in some countries, the local authorities have much bigger decision-making in this field, and so they couldn't really get maybe centralized information. Okay, I think I have mentioned the challenges as I was presenting the findings, but in any case, this seminar will actually look deeper at more challenges, and so I will skip this part. And what I would like to briefly say is that at the end of this study, it seemed quite diverse and scattered, and we said, okay, but is there a way that we can actually find a more comprehensible, more workable manner of seeing the data, of reading this information? And so one of the researchers, who will speak later, Tommy Kilakowski, agreed to look again at all the data, at the findings of the report, and to put it way to group the countries, which have more or less similar level of development in terms of using this theory of sayings, doings, and relatings. You also have this paper in your folders. Very briefly, so with Tommy we were joking a bit that this looks a bit like, but if you look at the Mickey Mouse, this is the system based on which this categorization happened. I also want to mention that the listing is in each category is in alphabetic order so that people can just see more easily. And we have identified 4 groups. The first group is with strong practice architectures. It means it's the countries which has, let's say, most of these elements somehow quite well in place or quite advanced. The second group on strong practice architectures with some room for development. So just maybe some aspects of the criteria still have to be developed. The third group, the practice architectures where some parts have been developed, but it means a lot more has to be developed. And finally, the fourth group, the countries where practice architectures really need to be built. So this is probably the group of countries that have the most open field of development, so probably the opportunities are the biggest, but also the challenges are very big. In 2018, we tried to talk to 2 other groups. So in 2017, we talked to governments who got the information. And in 2018, we tried to get the perspective of youth work organizers, educators, and managers. And you will find some first findings as we go out of this room. We brought about 30 copies of this study. But again, on that link that I mentioned, you will find all of them. So here I have mentioned 3 papers. One that looked at views of educators and youth work managers. One that looked at the youth work from the perspective of sociology of occupations. And actually the author Marty is here, so you get to discuss with him the paper. And the one on ethical standards in youth work and how they support education of youth workers. So one of the authors, the main author, Sladjana, is also here, so you can discuss with her about this study. And the second track we pursued was talking to youth workers themselves. So we did online surveys, we did focus groups, we did workshops. It was throughout the year this process of discussion. And here are 3 papers that probably give a first hint of findings of what youth workers themselves think of their education, how they got motivated to get into youth work, what kind of educational background they have, and what kind of support they might need in the first stages of becoming youth workers. And James, Tommy are here, so you can discuss with them, again, the findings of their research, and I think all the authors are ready to take on board additional suggestions for improving. And that's it from us. It was long and dense, but you have the 2 main papers in your folders. And on this website, you will find all the patients that I mentioned. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Marta, and thank you, Tanya. So and now, I really hope that you will continue this discussion, like Tanya told you that many researchers are here present, and because right now we are having coffee break. You have a half an hour time to find these researchers and talk with them. So there is the coffee is outside of this room, and then there is also something to eat as well. So please enjoy. Me oltiin nimenomaan sovittu, että meillä on pelkästään nämä mikit. Mä ihmettelin, kun sä toit niille ne korva.
Joo, ministerille.
Niin. Joo, mutta joo.
varmaan suvisen. Tääkin tulee lävitse.